Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, am I really living the life I was meant to? Welcome to Female Fluence, where we stop waiting for permission and start remembering our power. I am Paria Hassouri, a mom, educator, and a women's empowerment coach. And this is a space for honest conversations about growth, purpose, and becoming who you truly are. Here, we wake up to ourselves. We release the guilt, reclaim our confidence, and rise with grace, truth, and a little bit of fire. If something in you is whispering, there's more, take the self-reflection quiz at femalefluence.com and see where you are in your journey. Because you're not here to play small, you're here to rise fully. Freebirding is a fresh, empowering alternative to the term empty nesting. And it's quickly becoming the new language for this midlife chapter when children leave home. Instead of focusing on what's been lost, we can focus on the quieter house, fewer daily responsibilities, and changing that season where that invitation is to reclaim you. It's a shift in perspective from empty to full of possibilities, where you become the proud bird launcher, celebrating the success of raising kids who are ready to fly. With the sky finally open again, this chapter can be filled with travel, new career paths, passion projects, lifestyle changes, and a deeper reconnection with the relationships that matter most, including the one you have with yourself. That's why freebirding is a new trend, because this isn't an ending. It's a midlife awakening, a renaissance, and the beginning of a bold new second chapter. My guest today, Paria Hassouri, is an author and a pediatrician whose personal essays have been published by the New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and in the Huffington Post. Her memoir, Found in Transition, A Mother's Evolution During Her Child's Gender Change, was published in 2020. She has also represented stories on stage through expressing motherhood, been featured in many different articles, and I actually have her new book here, which I loved, Harvesting Rosewater, and which is incredible. We will talk about that. So she is teaching, writing, and advocacy classes to UCLA primary care physicians in training. And she's a proud Iranian-American, mother of 3 young adults, and a physician. She currently lives in Los Angeles, California. I'm so excited to have you on my show, and I can't wait for us to dive in and talk about everything. So welcome to Female Fluence.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. This is really all the topics that I'm passionate about when I see you do your interviews. And so I'm very excited to be able to share my story and have this conversation with you and your audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's dive in. So, as a physician, I know it's a very demanding career. I'm curious how you balance, I mean, being a mom, of course, and then being a physician, and then doing all of the other incredible things you're doing, especially being an author, which is really time consuming. Like, I mean, I know there's a lot of us out there that go, well, I want to write, but how and like when did you find the time to do all of this?
Yeah. So I think that for me, I really didn't start writing and exploring my creative side until my kids. I started in my, I think, late 30s, early 40s probably, and that was when my kids were finally a little bit older and at a point where they could get up in the morning, make their own breakfasts,
More
do their
independent.
own, taking care of their own things at night. And so when, they were more mentally exhausting, but less physically and time challenging, I sort of took that time back for myself and started writing. And I mean, just in the last few years, I am working very very part-time as a physician, so that enabled me to sort of work more on my novel and get my novel out in August. But when I wrote my memoir, I was still working 4 days a week and still had a couple kids at home. And it was happening at 5 in the morning because that was the only way
Only time.
to be able to do it. So I think And when my kids were younger, that 5 in the morning wouldn't have been really possible, either. So, but I think it was just something that I felt so strong, like being having a creative aspect to my life was missing so much, and that I wanted it so badly at that time that it was worth getting up and doing it at 5 a.m. Yeah.
That's so inspiring because I know a lot of us have these callings, but we always kind of bury it and it's like, oh, it's not the time. I can't do it. But you're a good example of when you really, really want something and it's calling out to you, it's your passion. You have to make the time. If you have to get up earlier, if you have to put something else aside in the back burner, then this is what you have to do. So, and I'm glad that you've done it. So now your novel, Harvesting Rosewater is such a captivating story of resilience and hope, especially for women who are navigating these different transitions of life. And you really show these stages without giving too much away. Basically, I mean, I don't want to ruin the book for all the listeners, but it just follows the author, the Farah Ashfar, which is the main author, and she's a female chief of OBGYN as she struggles through divorce and empty nester and the pressure of her career and the emotional pull of there's everything that's going on in Iran with the woman life freedom and everything, all the memories that she's carried through that's really painful from the revolution. And she's carrying this deep secret with her for years that she just does not want to, tell anyone about. What I would love to ask, what parts of this story are purely fiction and what parts were inspired really by your real life and your own midlife journey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that most of it, other than the fact that the character's divorced and I'm not, divorced, but a lot of it was inspired by my own real life journey. I did live in Tehran from the ages of 3 to 10 and started out, used to go to a dual language English Farsi school that then closed and then went to third and fourth grade in hijab. And then we came here, in 1983. So I did live through part of the revolution, part of the Iran-Iraq war. So really pretty much all the scenes in Tehran, other than the opening chapter, are either my own experience or the experience of somebody very close to me, like my older sister, or somebody else. And then I think the part of Farah where she is in sort of midlife and a physician and having a lot of frustrations in the healthcare system and an empty nester and trying to figure out what she wants to do next. Minus the divorce part is really a
Mhm.
100% me. I'm not an OBGYN, I'm a pediatrician, but all the same frustrations with just a female at work and feeling like she has to work so much harder to climb that ladder, dealing with the insurance companies, the demands of the patients, the emails, the putting in her own hours after
Yes.
work. I mean, that's all not really
Real.
fiction,
And then coming home and trying to balance and like feeling guilty with all the
Right,
children activities. Yes, I mean,
right,
I understand that's as real as it gets. And I mean, I realistically too, I want the readers to know that this book is not it's not a divorce story. It's a story about a woman like really in midlife and just showing the transition and that resilience and trying to find that hope and rediscover herself, which
right.
I really loved. I really connected with it because I think anyone, especially in midlife, reading this book is going to connect to some part of Farah's story. There's so many sections and there's so many layers.
Right. And it's so interesting to me because I will sit down and do like Zooms and virtual book club meetings with any book club that picks my book. I'll do like a little Zoom in for a half an hour Q&A. And over I hear American women in, midlife say, I there's so much of this character resonated with me, even though, I'm not Iranian American. I didn't live through revolution and war, but just everything she's going through in midlife are things that are resonating with me, are, the issues she had in her marriage, the challenges she had with her children, the challenges at work, the just like, who am I at 50, and have I ever really lived for myself? I think is sort of the big question. And I think that that's why this, free birding, empty nesting shift, I really do think of the empty nesting time, because empty nest sounds sad.
And I have to say I'd
But
never really heard that before you mentioned it, and I love it. And I just thought that is so true. Like we always make it into such a sad word. Like right now I have a 20-year-old, so she's in third year in college. My
yeah,
second daughter's going to graduate this year, so I'm already really sad about it.
yeah,
And then I have my son who's a freshman, but like it's just that whole fear, like, oh gosh, like in a few years I'm really going to be an empty nester. But like you really shed a light on the situation, that it's not like we are, bird launching. This is our goal. We want these kids to go out in the real world as
right,
adults and be successful and
right,
independent. And in return, this is the time for us to kind of reflect and say, okay, now it's time to spend, have quality relationship with people I haven't had a chance to. Make more
right,
time for my husband, make more time for me.
right. Right. Make more time for yourself. Figure out a new, whether it's a new hobby, a new career path. I mean, I think there's so much to look forward to in the empty nesting period. And so, yeah, I think all of that, the character experiences in the book and resonates, with the audiences who read the book, I think, regardless of their nationality or how much they have in common,
Yes.
with the main character of the novel. So,
I completely agree. Now, I know this, it really personally resonated with me being Persian as well, but I think it's really important that like for the listeners to know there's, when we talk about there's a part with your life as a girl, in what the kinds of things you had to go through the revolution. So how would you say how important it is for a child and their upbringing and their environment, because it really like things that there's like something in the story that happened when you were young, how you carried that and these memories that just really you carried until you actually spoke to someone about it and like release the pain. So this is, I think, really important for all of us to be aware of having a lot of conversations with our children and making sure that environment is safe because it does affect them.
right. Yeah, so I mean, in the story, well, first there's a part where the Islamic Revolution happens, and so when Farah is in school, she's being asked by the teacher, one, she's suddenly having to, cover up to go to school. And then at home she's in a family that's not particularly observant or religious.
Yeah.
And then at home, they're listening to music and they're dancing, and her parents are drinking alcohol and
It's a
they're
little
having
confusing.
their
Yeah.
card games. And then, when she goes to school, the teachers are asking, do anybody's parents drink alcohol at home? Because that's, against the revolution. And is anybody, gambling at home? And she is having to be one person at school and learning to lie to teachers who's she's always been told the teacher is like is supposed to be the safe person, right? And now, she's at school sort of lying to teachers. And then all that she also has this kind of traumatic event that happens to her, and all this secrecy makes her feel like responsible and confused about what she can and can't share with her parents. And so then, when her cousin gets arrested and she feels like it's her fault, she holds on to the fact that she was there when her, cousin got arrested. And this really ends up influencing her for the rest of her
Rest of her
life
life.
until finally in her 50s. Then the women life freedom movement happens, and she's forced to face, all of this. And I think even for me, even though my children, I mean, my husband is sort of Iranian-American, as well. But when the women life freedom movement happened, and I went to the global day of for Masa Amini, it was the first time that I had been surrounded by, even though I'm, living in Los Angeles, surrounded by so many Iranians, because, a protest and a march is just, a level of numbers. And it was so emotional and hard for me to do that. And I think that also, for the first time, that media attention to that movement, the first time we really saw Americans starting to pay, some attention, had my children start asking me questions about my past and when I lived there. Like, my children had never seen a picture of me in hijab, like didn't know that I went to school in hijab, weren't really aware that I like went back and visited in my 20s a couple of times and wore hijab, and didn't know my mother's story of being a teacher in Iran and having to quit her job, and all these things. And my children started taking an interest in asking all these questions, and it just made me think, like, there's so many conversations we don't have. Here I didn't have all these conversations with my parents. Like, we moved to the US and just pretended like nothing ever happened, and everybody was just trying to like survive and succeed and do the best they could. And and then I didn't have the conversations with my children about how just those few years of living through that have had such a tremendous impact on who
I
I
think it's
am
part
today.
of our culture. I mean, I would say there's a lot part of the Iranian culture that you don't really talk about these things because I don't recall, like, I feel like we packed up in the middle of the night, we came here,
Right.
and I was terrified, I was so confused. But there was, and things have changed too. I think now we are being taught as parents to have more conversation, to be more open, to be more real versus like you just listen as we tell you, just do what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Don't ask questions, right? So I think that has a lot to do with, because exactly what you're saying, I feel the same way. Like, it's like, why did we not have these questions? Why didn't we have conversations? Like, we're scared, we're confused, we don't know what's going on. But we didn't.
Right. We didn't. And even when I got to the US, the first year I was here, there was a lot of bullying. My family moved to Madison, Wisconsin when we first got here. And I was like the only brown person in that school in fifth grade. And there was a lot of bullying. And I had a sister who's a couple of years older, and I don't know if she experienced that or not. Like, even among my sister, who's only 2 years older than me, like, we didn't talk and
Talk.
say, like, are you okay at school? Like, what's going on with you?
Because that
Hey,
would have made it so much easier. You would have made the connection. And it's like,
right,
I'm not alone. It's not just me. This is normal.
right. So hopefully, hopefully we're doing a little bit of a better job in our,
I hope so.
in our
I hope
generation.
so.
Yeah.
Well, I think now that we're talking about this, it's kind of important to acknowledge what's happening in Iran, which is so heartbreaking. And I just feel like with your book right now, when I was reading it, like during this whole situation is like turning on the news, like reading your book, I just felt like I was just surrounded and just traveling back to the past, that revolution, now being back here. I just, as we're watching, and the world is watching and witnessing Iran's fight for independence, for a revolution, for freedom. I mean, what are your thoughts or reflections about everything that's happening? I know
Yeah.
it's really hard for all of
It's
us.
it's very hard. I think we all have this like mixed bag of emotions of, hope that maybe things will change again, but we had that hope in 2022 with, the Women Life Freedom Movement,
Yes.
and you know, and there were minimal changes in the country, but certainly no revolution. And so again, you have this hope, but have a feeling like probably maybe not much will change because there too many people are being killed, and that's sort of how many people can keep dying before this happens. So you have the hope, but then you have the guilt
The
because
guilt.
you're just sitting here watching it on your phone, and there's nothing, you feel guilty to be sort of relatively safe in your home in the
I,
US, watching. You have the fear for, I'm sure I have extended family relatives there. I'm sure, you do. So it's like
yeah.
fear, hope, guilt, all of this. And then just tremendous awe at the bravery of the people who are out there. And I think, I don't, and that so many times, so many women have been at the forefront of these, different movements and protests in Iran, but really all of the people there. And I think, I don't like to get too political because I know there's some different political
Yes.
opinions on what should happen next. But the part where I will get political, I'm pretty political in my book, but is that, I sometimes, will hear things like, well, the US or some outside force is going to come in and make the country great again. And it's like, no, actually, it's the people there who are going to make this country great again, who are brave, risking their lives, burning mosques, risking their families' lives because they want a true democratic government. And so I'm just more than anything in awe of the bravery of the people who are out on the streets.
I totally agree with you. I mean, the guilt is a lot there. I've always felt this sense of guilt anyways. Like when I talk to like relatives who are there or and I recently went to Iran, I think 2, 3 years ago, and it was just like you feel this sense of guilt, like, oh well, you were somehow able to leave and you came here and it's just very difficult for them, that especially for females. But I'm so proud. Like I am so proud. I mean, of all of them, especially the woman, the bravery. And I love the fact that at least now, even though the attention is on Iran, at least people in general globally are getting more educated and
Mhm.
understanding that the people and the government, are two different things. And just really understanding what is happening over there because a lot of times they've been fed the wrong information. So that's the only good thing that I just feel like that's happening, especially with social media. Not so much the news, but I think social media is really helping with spreading that kind of real message out there.
Right.
So we just have to pray and hope that something will happen and just have hope.
Yeah.
So now let's changing gears a little bit. Let's see. Let's talk about your memoir book. I thought, and I know you had a part of that in this book as well. You shared part of your journey that is, I would think, very challenging and hard, raising a transgender child. And I not only did you embrace it, but you learned from it and you wrote a book and you're educating other people who are going through a similar situation. And so you kind of woven that into a character into this story, Harvesting Rosewater. And if you're comfortable enough to share like how you were able to do all of that, like with the demanding pressure of your job. And I know already having teenagers is difficult. And then having that on top and making sure that you're still paying attention to your other child.
Yeah.
If you can just kind of tell me how you found hope and courage to support your child fully while still holding yourself together in the process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would like to say full disclosure that initially I didn't handle it well at all. So
Which is
initially,
completely understanding.
right. So I did have, it really took me 6 to 9 months to sort of go from like denial and anger over her coming out. My daughter came out when she was 13 and a half, and I had been like gobsmacked, blindsided, like had never any clue that, that my child, who I thought was my son, was my daughter. Like no clue whatsoever. So, I think so it took about 6 to 9 months to go through like a denial and grief period. But then moving into sort of acceptance and then really embracing learning advocacy, actually realizing that this experience has enriched my life and opened my heart and mind beyond anything I could have possibly ever imagined. So but I think the key turning point for me was reaching out to other parents who also had kids who were transitioning and were going through this process and developing the right support network. Because when she first came out, I mean, I didn't know any other parents who were going through this same experience. And, you have, all your friends and they're all navigating different challenges
Yeah.
having teens, but nobody was navigating this. And I felt so alone,
Alone.
alone. And so I joined a support group of parents in the greater Los Angeles area who had trans youth. And the friends I found there, the support I got, the way I was just immediately embraced and educated and had my hand held made such an incredible difference. And it was ultimately, a lot of things influenced my decision to share my story, but again, one of them was that when I wrote my book, interestingly, I've gotten so many emails from parents who felt like that they really resonated with the book and the experience. And, I would get emails from, just sort of American parents saying, thank you so much for writing this. And I saw myself in this and, whatever. And then I would get emails from Iranian parents who had kids who were transitioning who would say, I feel so alone and like I have no one I'm allowed to talk to about this. And again, I think, it becomes in certain immigrant communities, we don't talk about things, we don't put it out there, we don't talk about it. But really, you need support to
Yeah.
get through. The number one way to get through any difficulty is to have a good support system, around you and to talk about it and to reach out to people who've experienced it and walked the walk before you and see how they did it. And I think, once you get through it, you really realize that like navigating a child transitioning is not any that different than navigating the many other things you navigate, with a teenager. At first, it feels like this is so different, but at the end of the day, we are all trying to figure out how to put thriving, happy adults out into the world,
Yep.
thriving, happy, independent adults out into the world so that then we can go on and
That's our
focus on
goal.
ourselves. Right. And so now whether the issue is you're helping them through a transition, you're helping them through something else. I mean, it's all, really the same. But I think just finding a support system is the
Oh,
best thing I
definitely.
can
I'm
advise
so
to
glad you
anybody
did
is reach
that.
out.
Yeah, I think for anyone listening out there, and if you are going through a similar situation, I mean, I will leave your information so they can reach out to you, but definitely look out for a support group because this is not something that you should be experiencing alone, for sure. The other thing I really appreciate in your book is that you really showed what physicians go through because I mean, my husband's a physician too, and it's a similar thing. Like you're, besides the fact that the schedule is crazy and everything is hard, it's a broken system, right?
Right.
You're frustrated. You want to make sure you're being attentive. I have a lot of friends that are physicians and they're always like, I want to really be there for my patients. I want to have a conversation with them, but it's like I can't. My hands are tied with the insurance requirements, the time limits, and the constant pressure to like move fast. Like make sure you see more people. Like why didn't you see enough patients today?
Right.
So can you talk about what that reality is like behind the scenes and how that pressure impacted both, doctors and patients emotionally? Because that's really difficult.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really the issue is that the insurance reimbursements are so incredibly low for physicians right now, and the overhead and the malpractice, and the system of the lawsuits and how much you can be sued for, which then therefore drives up your malpractice and your overhead cost, and then you're getting nothing back, from insurance, makes it so that you are having to see so many patients per day to be able to sort of, meet your overhead. Now, whether you're employed, whether you have your private practice, and and not only are you now having to see many more patients than you ever had to, and trying to address all of their needs in 10 to 15 minutes, which is really impossible. But then on your own time, there's also this issue of, we've set up this expectation of having full access to your doctor at any time, like, they send an email, they want it, answered, right away, their emails, phone calls, after hour calls, and then so much time spent charting and documenting, which are, new requirements. And as somebody who, I started practice in 2002, so it's like 23, years of practice. I mean, I started out, we wouldn't see that many, patients, but we did still see a fair amount of patients. But documentation wise, like it was on paper and it was like, okay, like right ear hurts, ear infection. I was like, you could have like 17 notes on one page because you just wrote like what mattered. And now you can see a child with ear infection and it'll be like a 3-page note because of like what's required to document, which is, crazy. So
Wow.
and we would also, there was no, there weren't patients, emailing us or call, it's like they would call, and then if there was an issue, the front desk would say, okay, do you want to come in to see the doctor or not? And it wasn't this like back and forth email and the after hour calls. And so it's that we are seeing so many more patients and then spending so much time documenting on our own time, so much time replying to, emails and taking phone calls. And all of this is uncompensated work for physicians. A lawyer, anybody else like bills by the 15 minute, the
So
half an
true.
hour, whatever. But physicians, everything they do other than the office visit, if you're a traditional insurance taking doctor,
Mhm.
is not reimbursed. So then basically what happens is that you want to take insurance and see HMO patients, but then you have to see so many a day that you can't give them the time that you would like to give them. And so then if you're somebody who wants to like be able to spend time and really give the patient the time and
Very
attention
stressful.
that they deserve, you're sort of forced to go into this either PPO or PPO cash or, practice or, or concierge type thing, which is not what you want to do. I mean, people who went into healthcare generally don't go in to become, like a concierge and cash, type caretaker.
Right, right.
But it's a very, very broken system, and it is, and I think it's a broken system that, in my book, drove the character to sort of have to leave for a while and reassess what she wanted to do. It's a broken system that led me to, in the last few years, going down to working very part-time and focusing on a very, specific thing, and having to leave general pediatrics. And I think at some point there's going to have to be some sort of resolution because people need physicians and physicians want to take care of people. But we have to make this work. I mean, it's crazy. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's too bad that's how it's become. Like I totally agree with you. I mean, it was the same thing. My husband just felt, I mean, he shifted gears because he was just burned out. Like with the
Yeah.
insurance situation, he was burned out too. And you see so many doctors, changing their ways and having like a wellness center instead where they can just charge you and not,
Yeah.
not doing the traditional
Yeah.
medicine. So I totally
Yeah.
understand why that's happening.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we've talked about everything here, but one of the biggest things I want to just touch back on again. So for some an other woman right now listening to you, and we've talked about how we shouldn't grieve for being an empty nester,
Yeah.
embrace the free birding and pursue our passions and really embrace midlife. What's the very first step you recommend to move the ladies from that sadness, right, into not now this is a new world of possibility? Because I know that there's a lot of that happens, or they go into depression, or if they haven't been working and now they look at their resume and they just panic, like, what do I do now? I don't even know my passions. I don't even know who I am. How do they get over that bump to actually realize that this is not grieving, this is another stage, and this is the time for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there definitely can be, and some amount of sort of grieving
Grieving.
process in any life transition, and for that, and so I think it's normal to grieve and when you become an empty nester, but that should just be like a little temporary thing, hopefully, and then you're moving on, to the next phase. I mean, I'm a big proponent of, talk to someone, and I think, a lot of times, obviously, if you're having a difficult time, you may, depending on the level, you may need to, see a therapist or something like that. But just in terms of if it's more just being stuck or not knowing, what to do. I mean, I think for me, I really feel you can even like reach out to a friend and say, let's, once a week, like meet for coffee and try to think of like, what are the things we want to do, next in our life? I mean, you don't need a life coach. You need I mean, life coaches are great, too, but not everybody can afford to get, a life coach
Right.
who will help them, figure out what they want to do. So I think, you can read inspiring books, you can listen to podcasts, featuring other women, to become inspired. You can meet a friend for coffee for, 5-10 minutes and try to kind of just think together of like, what are
Good.
times when you feel happy? What's the last time you did something just for yourself that you enjoyed it? And if the last time you did something just for yourself and you enjoyed it, is there any way to make that into something you can do
Hmm.
regularly and possibly shift it into either a side hobby, a side business, or a new, career, altogether? I mean, when I first started writing, in my late 30s, early 40s, I can't remember, I think it was right around 40. I mean, it just started out with, I just started doing a little bit of blogging for myself. I mean, it was just like started with a blog post, and, it was like a few years of blogging before I started publishing essays online and, Huffington Post and things like that. And then eventually there was like a book in 2020, and, but it started out with something really simple as a blog. And so I think something can start really, really simple. I mean, I have a good friend here in Los Angeles who started playing mahjong
Oh,
because
I've heard about that's become
oh my
really
gosh. Well,
popular.
it is my new obsession, but she started playing mahjong because she really enjoyed it. And then she started teaching other women to play mahjong in her house. And then she built up a mahjong Instagram, and now she runs a mahjong league.
Oh
And
my
she took
gosh.
her little mahjong hobby and made it into a second career for herself. And so, like, it can be fun, it can be creative, it can be something that brings you joy. And I
Joy.
think in this time when there's so much you can do on the internet, there's really, you can start something very small and see where it goes, and it works out, or it doesn't work out. And I think one of the other things I always think about is, I think traditionally we have really sort of valued and praised, somebody will be like at a job for 50 years and then retire and have this big retirement, party. And that's wonderful. And if you love your job and you want to be there for 50 years, great. But I also think we should celebrate the person who decides that every 5 to 10 years they want to shift and try something new, because we are living long lives, you know, and we can be different people at different stages in our life. And
So
so
true.
I can be really a very like science medical oriented person at a certain point in my life, and then I can be a creative person, in another, point in my life, and not to be really kind of, and it is hard to make that decision after so many years of schooling and sacrifice, to say, okay, I'm going to now make that a part-time, and focus on this, other part. But we each really only have one life to live. But I guess coming back to the practical, like, put like a weekly coffee date with a friend where you just sit and just brainstorm, like, what things make me happy, what things give me joy, and just start small and go from there.
Starting small. I think that's one of the biggest problem is that people immediately think that overnight they're supposed to know like what they want to do and what they want to transition. But I think when you're in this stage, it's very normal to just embrace all those different chapters. It's like, yes, there's going to be a grieving, you'll be a little sad, the house will be a little different, it's a little quieter. But then throughout, start doing a self-reflection, start brainstorming, start journaling, start, exploring and hanging out with people that make you feel good. And just like you were saying, figure out what is actually, when you have that best feeling, what is it that you're doing? What brings you joy? And see if you can connect with that to make that into something bigger, but baby steps, little by
Right.
little. So,
Right.
and I also wanted to ask you the name Harvesting Rosewater. How did you come up with that for your book?
Yeah, so a lot of my book takes place in wine country, which
You
we
know, by
didn't
the way,
talk
after
about.
your book, I was like, I need to go wine tasting, like
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah, so yeah, I would like to say that I think that most of my book is light and fun actually, and we talked a lot about the serious points, but so a lot of my book takes place in wine country, and so I wanted to use a term involved with wine, which is, harvest and
Harvesting. Yeah.
harvesting, and I wanted to blend the harvest with something, from Iran that has importance to me, and so in the book, it starts out the opening scene, she's having ice cream that has rose water in it. And then sort of at a halfway point, she goes to her parents' house in Cincinnati and there's sort of the smell of rose water, all in the air. And then she brings back a little rose water with her to Paso Robles and eventually New York. And so I think the Rosewater kind of was in the start and then wasn't there for a long time and came midway through and evolved with her, as she kind of came to peace with her identity of who she was. She started putting out a little bit rosewater in a glass, every day. And it was sort of like the merging of all her identities and figuring out who
That's
she was. So
beautiful.
so I think harvesting rosewater was sort of just like taking this idea of harvest as this like beautiful, bountiful time that's usually associated with farming and winemaking.
Hmm.
But she's really, with the harvesting rosewater, she's sort of harvesting herself or figuring out herself. So I was just trying to kind of blend the parts
I
of
love
the
it. I mean,
era
now that
into
you
a title.
explained it, and I remember that this different stages, and you did really bring it back into the story.
Yeah.
And it's just like that smell is like immediately like it's smell of Iran. Like it's like the
Right.
food that, so I think that's a really, it's a powerful and a very good symbolism of the whole story
Yeah.
as a title. So that's wonderful. I have really enjoyed talking to you today, and I think that we've just explored so many different things from the powerful midlife concept of free birding to reframing it, from the empty nesting as a season of expansion rather than loss. And then just instead of focusing on what's missing once the kids leave home, we've talked about how this can actually be a new beginning, a new chapter, a time to reconnect with your identity and rediscover your passions and finally give yourself permission to pursue what you've been putting on hold for years and years. You've also shared a lot of the inspiration behind your great new book, just which is like a moving story centered on resilience, truth, and self-discovery in midlife. And we've really talked about how we can shape our present and why midlife can be a renaissance instead of a breakdown. And it's just like a perfect doorway into that second act where we can feel more free and becoming. Is there anything else you would like to share with us before we end this amazing conversation?
No, I mean, I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope people are inspired to, go out and try something new and look forward to if they're in the if they are in that thick of a lot of midlife people are very much in the thick of parenting.
Yeah.
So if they are in the thick of parenting, I hope that they have something kind of to look forward to in the future. And like I said before, anybody who does interested in reading the book or brings a book to their book clubs, I'm happy to like zoom in for Q&As. But yeah, I've loved this conversation. I'm really happy to be part of the group of inspiring women that you have on your show. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. And all the your links will be on my show notes, so my listeners can get a hold of you and get this incredible book. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for spending this time with me here on Female Fluence, where we rise, reflect, and remember who we are. If something from today's episode spoke to you, share it with another woman who's ready to rise too. And before you go, download your free empowerment coaching guide at femalefluence.com. It's your next step toward living with more clarity and confidence. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at pearlmashour_femalefluence. And if you're ready for deeper support, sign up for a free discovery call. I would love to connect with you. Remember, my friends, don't just exist. Live your life fully, bravely, and in truth. I'm Pearl Mashour, and until next time, stay true, stay powerful, and stay you.